YouTubers, welcome to Sharp Context Sports.
YouTubers. Hey, can my boy Teddy Bridgewater get some love around here? I remember being a former Vikings fan and watching the draft. I fell asleep. And during the draft, Minnesota Vikings, you hear the Minnesota Vikings have traded up to the number 32 spot. And then I remember just jumping up in joy. Hey, this is Teddy Bridgewater. I love Teddy Bridgewater in college. What he did in Florida and against Florida, he picked apart that defense as a underdog. And then you watch his films in Louisville, and he was just, he's a poor man's Peyton Manning. He was just slicing and dicing everyone in college. And then he comes into the pros as a rookie, thrown into the fire. He finished 6-6 with no talent on that team. His best receiver was Greg Jennings. And then the next year, they go on trade for Mike Wallace, okay? Who eventually just couldn't even make it on the team after he got released. I thought he had a really solid rookie year, and then the second year with AP, when he came back, he was in a position that handicapped him because the Vikings just kept running on first downs for 1-2 yards, They literally ran 70-some plus % on first down and just putting Teddy in a third and long all the time. No quarterback's going to succeed with that. And even with that handicap, they were a field goal away from beating the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs. Boy, do I remember that day, huh? Something with the Minnesota Vikings curse. And then I remember in his third year, going into his third year, I think it was training camp, like literally a week before the season opened. And you just get the news of his injury. And, it was shocking. The players were crying because that team had a legit chance of making it to the Super Bowl and maybe even winning. And his journey from that moment on is just something inspiring, Not knowing if you're ever going to play it down in the NFL. And then when you finally recover, you come back and you find out your job's already been taken by Case Keenum. And then after that season, the Vikings signed Kirk Cousins. And then he signed with the Jets. And then the Jets signed they drafted Sam Darnold. And I think the best thing to ever happen to him was Sean Payton trading for Teddy Bridgewater. Okay? That was the best thing that could ever happen for him. Sean Payton knows his quarterbacks. Okay, you look at Drew Brees. No one wanted Drew Brees. He brought Drew Brees in and they win a Super Bowl. And then before that, when he was in Dallas, the story was he was the one that wanted Tony Romo. So for him to trade for Teddy Bridgewater, that means a lot. That says a lot. And with how Drew Brees is playing this year, I'm sure they're probably regretting not signing Teddy to a long-term deal. Or even then, you look at the game last year in the playoffs. His mobility and his lack of arm strength really showed. I do think the game could have been different if Teddy was playing against the Vikings in the playoffs. Because of his mobility and, it's just how the game plan was to rush up the middle against Drew Brees. And Teddy was able to stretch the field a little bit more, It's been a long journey for Teddy Bridgewater. His game manager label that the media puts on him, I don't think there's any truth to that. Because if you look at him in Minnesota, they had no receivers. And then he goes to the Saints, they had no deep threat. Ted Ginn was just an old man at that point. Michael Thomas can't stretch the field. Taysom Hill was their second best receiver. And you look at him now in Carolina, he's just balling out because he actually has receivers, legit receivers, okay? And he's doing it without Christian McCaffrey. I believe as of right now, Teddy is a top 10 quarterback. And if he can just start getting into the end zone, just start scoring touchdowns, that'll propel him into the top 5. That's the only thing, in my opinion, that is holding him back is the touchdown ratio, which will improve once they get a tight end and a red zone threat. They don't have a red zone threat right now. So I'm glad Teddy has found a home, with Matt Rule, who I believe is a really good coach. And the owner of the Carolina Panthers, David Tepper, he seems like the kind of guy who, whatever he touches, turns into gold. He's a really smart guy. There's a reason why he's a billionaire. I think Teddy's in good hands, and his future looks really bright there. He's got a ton of weapons, an improving defense, a good play caller, a great coach. He's got everything he needs to succeed there. I think they can win a Super Bowl within the next... As long as Teddy's there, they'll always have a chance. Him, Matt Rule, and David Tepper, they'll figure it out.